Welcome to another edition of Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith. This podcast is dedicated and committed to sharing the story of real people that have overcome real obstacles in their lives to give other people hope. I am on a mission to give people hope in whatever it is they're going through. And just so many people, including myself, have suffered in silence. That the courage and vulnerability of our guests has given so many people a pathway out. And today I am joined by Trake Carpenter. Trake is the host of the Golf Performance Show, GPS podcast, which I've had the pleasure of sharing an episode with. He is a holistic golf instructor, incredible background in golf, and his own overcome story. I like to call people like Trake a dual threat. He's got both the kind of insight into the mental performance side of life, how golf kind of reflects life, and also, your own story of overcoming some adversity in your life and how those lessons have served you. So welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Charlie. Good to jump on each other's show and sit on opposite ends of the table and share each other's perspective. So happy to join you. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, it's been great. I mean, just having gotten to know you recently, but feeling like I've known you a long time, and how encouraging you've been in my growth personally and supportive. It's just great to kind of get you on here and hear a little bit about what it's been like to live your life. And so you started, tell us a little bit about your origin story. You grew up in a small town, right? In Indiana?
Yeah, small town, northern Indiana, really small family. Most of my family still lives there. I'm kind of the only one who's wandered away from home and stayed away from home for any significant amount of time. So that's got some challenges in and of itself over the years. But, I grew up in a small town playing golf and obviously basketball in Indiana. Like, that's just what you do, right? My whole family played, my dad played, my uncle played, and that's what I grew up knowing, right? But golf was always the thing for me that really stuck, more often than not. I just kind of grew up. We played golf every summer with my uncle and his two sons. He was a school teacher, so we had the summers to just kind of go play golf every morning, and that's how I learned to play. So, that's kind of affected how I've grown up in golf and coached and all that stuff along the years. But grow up in a small town. I go to college, and I had as many people in my freshman dorm, my first year of college, as I had in my entire town growing up. So like shell shock day one, right? Like I had no idea what I was doing when I got to college. So that was probably the first time where I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. How do I navigate this?
Yeah, it's interesting because, and I want to talk a little bit about that transition from, kind of, golf as a hobby, playing competitively in high school, and navigating, the opportunity to play at a higher level, and talk about a little bit about some of the pressure that you faced going from playing golf competitively in high school to playing golf for the first time, and what it was like to navigate, getting offers or not getting offers, or kind of understanding that you wanted to take golf a little more seriously. And I use that really as a contrast to anything that we choose to do seriously. It's, that adage is what I want consistent with what I do. And if I want to be a casual golfer, there's a set of behaviors that go along with that. But if I want to play in college, there's a set of behaviors that go along with that. And and the pressure changes. What was that like for you? And how did a kid from a small town end up playing collegiate golf?
I was really lucky. I knew the right person who got me in the door. Ball State was my only Division I offer.
Uh-huh.
I never played outside of Indiana growing up, so I was really naive, for lack of a better term, getting to college. And my biggest mistake was I thought I was way better than what I was, but I didn't know any better, right? Like I thought I was competitive in high school, and then you get to college, and every other player on the team was me or better on their high school team, right? And so it's like, whoa, you kind of shell shocked at first, or at least I was, right? And it's very intimidating. We had a lot of older players on the team, and I struggled for a really long time to grasp, like, how do I overcome this and get to that level? And a lot of it was trial and error at that point, and finally broke down kind of some of my stubbornness and started to ask for help and try new things. And that was the first time in my life I think I was really challenged on a different level that was outside of my comfort zone. And so being just in that uncomfortable environment forced me to kind of my first maybe breaking point of, okay, this doesn't work. I have to find a better way and start asking for help.
Yeah, I think the NCAA recently did a study. I think 85% of athletic trainers on college campuses today say that their student athletes are suffering from some level of performance anxiety. And maybe you can talk a little bit about this in a little more detail, because I think it's a little bit customary for high school athletes to be getting a lot of that have a high level of aptitude for a certain sport and a high level of interest in a certain sport, and they play really well in high school. And it doesn't have to be just a small town in Indiana. I think it's even in larger communities. If you have both of those attributes, so a little higher than average aptitude and a little higher than average interest in a sport, and you're successful, you achieve in high school. You're getting playing time, or you're performing well on your high school team, and your coaches are giving you a lot of accolades, and your parents are giving you a lot of accolades. Maybe you're getting written up in the local paper, and then you get to college and everybody was good. And in your eyes, maybe some of them, your mind was telling you they're even better than me. And it's the first time I think that self-doubt really creeps in, and that little kind of inner critic starts chirping at you in a way that he hadn't chirped at you before. Is that consistent with your experience?
Yeah, totally. At that point in my life, I had no idea what like talking to yourself meant. Like I was just listening, right? And that voice is, yeah, you're not good enough. How are you ever going to make the lineup? And then you start thinking, man, all these people I know at school, they start asking about how golf's going and it's not going well. And so that builds, right. And then, you get the expectations of people back home asking, how are things going? And you start to feel like a failure a little bit after a while, because that's where my values were, right? It's like, if I didn't perform at a certain level, then that mirrored my value, right, as a person. And that was the first mistake, is I didn't know what were my real goals, right? Like obviously everyone wants to go and play and win tournaments and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's got to be a lot more to it than that, because if that's how you're judging yourself, you're in a really tough spot, because the percentages aren't in your favor the higher you go in any endeavor, right? So, learning to value other things that were important to me outside of performance is a really hard thing to do when you hit an uncomfortable spot and you just feel like performance is everything.
And describe performance, because obviously you had a certain level of skill. It's this comparison, right? This comparing your skill and your ability to something else, and getting it heavily attached to outcomes, which creates this pressure, and we get focused on the problems, right? We start talking about the problems. We start thinking about the problems. I remember reading about Alfonso Soriano's career at the end of his career with the Yankees, after he'd come back after being with the Cubs. All he kept talking about was his hitting slump and how it was costing his team, and his focus on both of those things, the problem and not knowing he had a different way to view those things and to get focused on a solution, really caused him to end his baseball career in abruptly and not in a way that he had wanted to. And so I hear you talking about the problem. It's not going the way I want. It really does create a lot of pressure on ourselves, doesn't it?
Yeah. And every time you tee it up, right, I'm like, that guy hits it further than me. That guy, his iron plays better. That guy putts better than me. Like mentally, I knew that they had me beat. Like, and you get in that perfection phase, right? Where as soon as something wasn't perfect as far as performance goes, for lack of a better term, I would just kind of quit. Like I would just throw in the towel, and that's not going to help the situation. But I didn't have the skill set at that point in my life to handle it, other than, okay, well, that didn't work. And I got tired of getting beat up after a while. And it's like, I've got to try something different. But for the most part, it's just, yeah, you constantly compare yourself to someone else, and they're getting more playing time. And, that school that we're playing's got more resources and a better indoor facility, and just anything that you could compare yourself to. I was playing that game, and you'll find someone to lose to every time when you play that game.
Yeah, so well said. You will find someone to lose to every time when you play the comparison game. It really is the thief of joy. And side note, the job of everybody else in this world is taken by them. There really is only one Charlie Smith, one Trake Carpenter, and that's why I think encouraging young athletes to start looking at what they are doing well, not as a way of self-promotion, but just as a way of acknowledging that there are certain things they're doing well, and there are certain things that they want to get better at, but not judging either of those things. I'm doing well at certain things and I want to get better at certain things. And it's the behavior that'll drive me there. And you got behind some different behaviors because you made a leap at Ball State, and I think you finished as a captain on that team. And that came from, I mean, what was the shift in you even at that age? What did you learn to ask for help in? And what was the shift in your mindset that got you to change that narrative?
I was always super competitive. Growing up, my uncle was actually my high school golf coach. My dad was my junior high golf coach. They were both basketball coaches. So I've always been around a competitive environment, right? And so I finally just got to the point where I'm like, there's got to be a way to figure this out. Like, I wasn't just going to quit altogether. And I basically started from scratch, and I went and hired a swing coach, and I totally revamped my game. And this was kind of going into senior year. I was like, it started to realize that, like, this is my last chance. And I just made the commitment to myself that I'm just going to lay it all out there and see what happens. And I just committed to overhauling my game, really going out there and, like, just see how good I am. And if I fail, well, I failed for 3 years already. What's another one, right? Like, took a little pressure off myself and took away, I guess, a lot of the expectations, and said, let's just commit to this thing and see how good I can be. And it worked out. I ended up winning or tying for first in a tournament in the fall, my senior year. And that for me was I guess rewarding that everything I had done had paid off, but it was also the realization of the values and the things that I did on the way to the mountaintop, not just that event. Like, that event itself isn't what's fulfilling. It's what I learned along the way that I know now and that I help teach and coach now. But I had to figure that one out a little bit on my own, which has, been a motivation for kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's funny to hear you say it, because I don't think anything could be further from the truth. Those 3 years weren't failures. I mean, the only failure for me is quitting. The only failure for me is packing in the golf clubs and saying, I'm going to go sit, in the dorm, and I'm going to drink some beer, and I'm going to hang out with my friends. But all of the 3 years that you said you were failing, you were actually failing forward. You were learning about your emotions. You were learning about the things that you weren't doing. You were learning so much in those 3 years, and you kept failing forward to your senior year, which led you to win a golf tournament. I think we don't really understand, the psychology of the word failure, because really, as long as you're in the game and as long as you're looking at improving, there is no failure. There's just learning. And that's what I heard is a whole bunch of learning.
Yeah. It's the fear of failure often will cause you to fail. And I was afraid of failing. And when I took, like you said, failure is okay. Like, it's not failure. Like you said, when I take that off the table, expectations go away, the comparison goes away. And if I don't shoot the lowest score, that's fine. That doesn't define me. And that's how I ended up playing my best golf. And you get the most enjoyment out of life for the same reason, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm drawn to, I spent a little bit of time working on a talk on resilience and what it actually means to be resilient. One of the athletes that I took a look at was Peyton Manning, and looking at his rookie season, leading the league in interceptions, being a starting quarterback that went 3-13. There was lots of things. I mean, he threw a Super Bowl costing interception in a game against the Saints. I mean, there were lots of things that, quote unquote, could have been seen as failures, but he used all of those things as lessons, and he didn't view any of them as permanent. He didn't view any of them as pervasive, and he didn't view any of them as personal, meaning this isn't going to define me. And that's, a version of what I hear you talking about is the glasses or the lens with which we see all of those things through can really dictate the next event for us, good or bad. And so when you were focused on failure, you kept failing. And when you decided to just enjoy golf, play golf, see how good I could be, you actually won. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, the term I use now a lot with golfers is the only way to gain control is to give up control. And that's true in golf, and it's true in life. You can't control outcomes, but I can control my effort, my energy, my attitude, right? Like, all these things that improve my performance and improve my quality of life. They go hand in hand. And if they both go one direction, good luck, right? So if I can take care of my life, my performance, I think, is going to follow suit more often than not. And that's why, like you and I have talked, I think golf mirrors life so much. And that's why I've been able to overcome a lot of things in my life through my journey in golf because there's so many similarities and vice versa, right? I think they feed off each other. So focusing on one and figuring out a way out of one has always kind of lifted the other up and got me to where I am.
That's amazing, man. What a great correlation. And I agree, golf is it's a reflection of life. There's so much that I think we talked last time we were together about. The golf ball knows a lot about us. The golf ball knows what we're bringing to the course. The golf ball knows whether we've prepared or not. The golf ball knows, a lot about us. And you talked really openly about that. So after Ball State and having some success, where did life take you?
So I graduated having no idea what I wanted to do. And oddly enough, we always had a graduate assistant, and I ended up talking Coach Fleck into letting me stick around and doing that because they would pay for school. I'd get a little stipend. I could hang around the golf team, right? And I was like, man, this is almost a better deal than having to play, especially for someone who at the end of the day wasn't all that good. So I did that. And I knew in the back of my mind all along, that's really what I wanted to do. A big inspiration for me was actually the coach before Coach Fleck, Coach Earl Yestingsmeyer, and he had been the coach there for about 40 years. And from the time he retired in the 90s until I graduated in 2012, he traveled to every single event minus two after he retired. And growing up in a family of coaches and being around someone like that who was just so passionate, he was always our biggest fan. Like that was inspirational for me and kind of led me into this coaching path. And when the graduate assistant job was over, 2 years of school, I decided that I was just going to kind of take a leap of faith, and I opened a yoga shop. I tried to start a lawn mowing business. I ended up screen printing t-shirts every day, like ran myself ragged trying to do all these things and figure out what I wanted in my life, knowing in the back of my mind that golf was what I should gravitate to from the experience I had and what I could give back based on some of the things that we've talked about. And, I made a lot of mistakes in a span of 2 or 3 years that were costly emotionally, financially. But at the end of the day, they led me back into coaching golf. And I've spent the last 4.5, 5 years coaching golf again. But yeah, those first kind of 2 or 3 years after playing and then coaching golf, and I got out of it and I failed, it forced me to realize again, what's really important, like what is my value here and what's my scorecard at the end of the day.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, I want to dig in here a little bit because, you know, I think we all have, I think a lot of people will say you got to search for your why or search for your purpose. And we're all led to do certain things over the course of our lives. And we can try to resist those. What was the drive to, was it that you didn't think you could have a career in golf, or was it that what other people think a career looks like is owning a business or mowing? What was the drive or the motivation to just to put up blinders to this lifelong passion of a sport that you loved and you were engaged in, and to shut that off? Was it just not that it wasn't going to serve your life's mission to be a professional golf coach or have some career in it? Or was it that the world thinks being in business is where you should be?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of, again, not really know. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I knew I had a passion for golf and a knowledge for golf. And selfishly, it was like, man, I can make a whole bunch of money in business. I can still hang around and help out the golf team. And that right there should have been my red flag, because my motivation for starting a business was not in the right spot. It's not where it is now, where I want to help people, right? I want to help them get through obstacles that I had, or avoid obstacles, and help speed up that curve so they don't have to experience things. But my motivation was, let's try to make a bunch of money, have this. And I had no idea what owning a business was like, right? And anyone you talk to who's owned a business, like they'll tell you it's not as glamorous as it sounds for the most part, or at least getting started, right? And I made that mistake, and the odds play out, right? Like I don't something like 97% of businesses fail within 2 years or something like that. And it's like we talked about, if my why is not big enough to keep me going, I'm eventually going to throw in the towel on that. And that was good in that situation because it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. It wasn't what I was passionate about. I mean, lawn care business, like I don't really care. Like yogurt, I don't really care. And I always paid attention to golf teams, and I'm watching, and it was just something where I thought I could just figure out, make a bunch of money and kind of do what I want, and lived in la la land, for lack of a better term, for a while, and just till I got to that breaking point again.
And how bad was that breaking point?
Um, it wasn't fun financially. I still cut some checks every month, which is it's been a good reminder for me of like my happiness is so much different now doing something that I love, that it's not about the money anymore. And I had that. So after I filed bankruptcy, I kind of jumped ship, got back into golf. I'm like, I'm just following wherever golf takes me. And I moved to Chicago and worked at a golf club there for a little while before I got into coaching again. And I just said, hey, like, I'm just going to go follow what I'm passionate about, be enthusiastic, give good effort, share the things I've been through with other people and junior golfers, whatever I can do along the way. And wherever that path leads me, I'm cool with that. And the last 4 or 5 years has been something I could have never imagined. Mowing yards after work, screen printing t-shirts, trying to do anything to stay afloat. And now it's like, looking back at just where I was emotionally and as a person, I was probably no fun to be around. I was miserable. And I realize now, even if it had gone well, I still wouldn't have been happy at the end of the day. I'm 99.9% sure I would still have gravitated more towards I'm doing now. But I probably would have hung out there longer, and it maybe would have taken me a longer time to get to where I am. So it was like that failure basically gave me no other option than to jump into something that I really love and that I'm passionate about. And now that I've, like, college, I had a failure, business, I had multiple failures. Like, I see failure differently now, and I'm not afraid of it. I almost seek it more than anything, right? Because every time you fail, you get closer to a yes or a win, and you only have to be right like one time.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm reminded of that Kobe Bryant interview where I think it was Lewis Howes asked him how he felt about losing, and he said it's exciting. And I think the reaction of the interviewer was a little taken back and didn't understand it. He said, because there's lessons. There's lessons. If you look for them, there's nuggets. There's lessons about what I can do to get better the next time. And that's, I think the 3 years you spent struggling in college, fighting, against comparison, fighting against what other people thought you should be doing, fighting your own view of what other people thought you should be doing, and then letting go of that and having success, and then jumping back in, not learning fully that lesson. And life keeps teaching us lessons. And I'm reminded, and I think people will enjoy, I think you'll enjoy this. There's a little poem by Rumi, a great philosopher, psychologist, who says, when I chase after what I think I want, my days are full of anxiety and fear. When I sit quietly in contemplation, I realize what I want also wants me. And when I realize that, I'm surrounded by the peace that I think I see in you, that what you want also wanted you, that this passion that you had to make a living pursuing, teaching, instructing, golf is something that also wanted you.
Yeah. And it's something, like you said, if I don't sit down, and I've been doing this a lot lately, like since I've gotten to know people like you, like when I decided I'm going to jump into the entrepreneurship boat again, which was a little intimidating, right? I've had a failure before, but here I am. I'm like, man, I'm chasing what I love. It's real. Like when I talk about it, I don't have to fake it. I don't have to make up stories, right? Like it's real things that I've experienced in my life that I can bring to what I do now. And it's funny, the coach that I've been working with, we're going through this process, and he's like, we have to start with the basics of why are you doing what you're doing so that you can communicate that properly to other people, because at the end of the day, that's how you're going to help. And all of these things that have happened in your life are why you've gotten to where you are now, and you have to be able to share those with others. And I've met people like you and gotten to know like Brian Kane, who we both know really well, and following people like Colin Henderson, who well, like you just start to meet people and I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be, right? Like cards, the dominoes fall in your direction when you're really chasing, but it's just so easy to get in this spot in life where you just want to be comfortable, right? Like, and you think when you just make yourself in this little comfortable environment, that's how you're going to feel. And when you chase that or money or material things, what you find is like you're miserable more often than not. And eventually that wears on you until you have to make changes, right?
Yeah, pain is a great motivator. My dear friend, mentor, brother George Mumford, always says, most of the change that he's made in his life came when his ass was on fire. And it's amazing. Pain can be a great motivator, but when you get to the other side of it, and you get uncomfortable and you realize that you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that really a lot of the good things in life, and what do we mean by good things? What I see when I talk about the good things, I talk about this clarity that you seem to have, and I think that's what people really want, is this clarity, this peace of mind, this serenity around their existence, and really understanding that it just means pursuing. I read in Earl Nightingale's book, I read his definition of success, which is just relentlessly pursuing a worthy cause. Whatever that may be, is his definition of success. Reasonably pursuing, a worthwhile or worthy cause. Which is, I think, your purpose, your passion, and finding it. And I'm just so amazed. And now, tell us a little bit about this approach, because I think golf is, or can be, depending on the glasses that we play with, a reflection of our own, dissatisfaction with some aspect of ourselves. It's very competitive. It's an individual sport, but we've got to lead ourselves. And you've taken this very holistic approach to golf. Can you tell us how you came to this holistic approach, and why you gravitate towards it versus some of the other ways that people coach golf?
Yeah. So, growing up self-taught playing golf, we just went and played golf. I didn't get formal swing instruction. I didn't know what TrackMan, like there's so much technology and everything and instruction in golf. And I just grew up playing, right? If I wanted to make it go left, well, I kind of knew how to make that happen, right? Trial and error. And there was an aspect of that, I think, that was good and bad looking back, right? And that's one part of golf, is the mechanics of it, right? The other part where I've experienced is how my personal life reflects how I play, right? Golf, you spend 1% of your time out there executing golf shots, and 99% of the time with your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you have stuff going on in your life, good luck keeping that at bay for 4 hours of the 4.5 hour round, right? And then, that's kind of what sparked, I think, my interest in the mental game. I coached in college for 4 years at 3 different places after I got back into it. And I could relate to a lot of the struggles that kids would have at that age, because I had been through that not that long ago, right? Like I had, and I was passionate about getting back into golf because it was what I loved. It was what I knew growing up, and I had chased the wrong things. And I could see when guys were worrying about, comparison or all these other things that I had dealt with. And that's where I got into kind of the mental game. And we worked with Brian Kane when I was at Marquette, and that kind of started to open my eyes a little bit to this mental aspect of it. And then I've always been kind of a math data driven person. So the strategy piece of game, like the numbers, has always been intriguing. And so when I coached college golf, it's kind of like that. It was like, there's a little bit of golf swing, a little bit of self-management, and a little bit of strategy and playing the numbers, right? Like it's a math game at the end of the day. And I think we've gotten to a point in golf where instruction has gone to social media, right? So, everyone on Instagram and Facebook, YouTube, whatever, everyone's like a swing instructor now, right? And I think that's how a lot of kids learn to play golf at a young age, is you go get a swing lesson, right? And there's a lot of really good golf swings, but a lot of the stuff we've talked about, that applies to golf too, right? Like it's so much more than this nice little box of standing on a tee and comfortable environment and someone teaches you how to swing a golf club right. Like that's great. It's good to have proper technique, but like we've talked about, you've got the swing management, you've got the self-management, and you've got the strategy piece to golf. And that's kind of what I've always known in college. And so as I jump into coaching players, I have a passion for the mental game and what I've learned over the years and how I've seen it impact me, and my love for data and math and all that kind of stuff. And I've had to learn the technical side over the years, but I'm like, everyone's kind of teaching in this silo. And like we've talked about, when you go out there and you hit a golf ball, that golf ball knows what you're thinking and knows what your target is. It knows your mechanics. That golf ball knows all of those things, right? And so if you teach golf in a silo, I feel like you're missing a whole lot of, how do you manage my emotions? How do I understand situations and manage myself? And you playing golf, this, right? Like, it's a reflection of your life. And if I'm not teaching the life portion of golf, I think a lot of these kids are going to miss out on what's possible in the game, whether it's competitive or not.
Yeah. The golf game that you play when you show up on that first tee really starts from the time you get out of bed. I mean, that game of golf has occurred, depending on how you started your morning. And if you started your morning rushed and you didn't make your bed and you didn't, get your homework done and you didn't, all of those things impact how you show up on the first tee. And if you don't have a good self-image of yourself, then as soon as the second person walks on that tee, right? Everything seems fine. You put your tee in the ground, you're on the first tee and the beautiful day. And then all of a sudden Johnny shows up or Bobby shows up and says, we have a match today. The whole day could change or not change depending upon how prepared you are. And I think that's what I love about, the holistic approach is you're right. You could sit on a mat with a flag and a target and TrackMaster and grind all that stuff in. But as soon as John shows up and says, I'm playing against you today, how are you prepared for that?
Yeah. It's like, am I going to play the comparison game? Right? Did I get enough sleep last night? Am I fueled, ready to go? Like, do I have my yardage book ready? There's so many things that go in to playing a round of golf that I've had to learn over the years. Right. And that's what my passion is, like, giving these kids tools so that they don't have to go to college and figure it out the hard way. Right. Like, I want to give them opportunities that I didn't have because of what I know and what I've experienced, and help them with that learning curve, because I've seen it as a player in college. I've seen it as a coach in college. I've seen how my life's been impacted on having the wrong values and seeking the wrong things. Right. I see kids that go have a bad round and they want to go get a swing lesson. And I'm like, man, let's just like get your homework done. Let's get you getting 8 hours of sleep at night. Like,
yeah.
Is there something going on in your family life? Did their girlfriends break up with them, whatever, like all these variables. And it doesn't matter what age you are. That stuff affects how you play golf. And if you avoid it, that golf ball knows, the scorecard knows, like, it all knows. Right. And so I've gotten on this mission of like coaching people to know what's your process, what are your values, what are your routines. And so much of it is not golf related, it's life related. I would rather coach a kid that said, yeah, I've got a swing instructor. Great. Like, keep doing it. Let's have a great golf swing. You're learning a lot of things, but let's figure out, how do we manage this in the moment, in competition? How do we prepare? How do we sleep? How do we, do meditation and journaling? And how do we reflect after rounds, and really dive into why are you doing what you're doing? Because that, at the end of the day, I think is the ticket for golf and life and business. It's why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So I think one of the things I want to, before we wrap up, I want to get to is the concept of pressure. And, the fact that pressure is just a signal that you're about to do something important. You're doing something you care about. That concept that Trevor Moad, who recently passed away, I think really emphasized was that pressure is a privilege. It is pressure is the privilege of those who are doing something they care deeply about. If I didn't care, then I wouldn't feel any pressure. If I didn't care about the outcome, I wouldn't care. If I didn't have any of my heart and soul invested in it, I wouldn't care. But it's hard to create pressure in practice. It's hard to create the nerves that come from having to make a putt that means something versus a putt that you're just doing. How do you help your clients, your athletes, your students understand pressure and how to create pressure in practice, or pressure in situations to prepare them for the pressure they're going to feel? Although nothing prepares us obviously for the moment, but the more we can prepare and expect that moment and know that there'll be some pressure, it doesn't have as much influence over us. And so what's the Trake Carpenter pressure recipe?
Yeah. So just to talk about pressure a little bit, I was talking to a young man I worked with last week, and we've had a couple of conversations about him feeling nerves and anxiety early in rounds. And we got to this point where I felt like he was fishing for like a magic pill that makes pressure and nervousness go away.
Right.
And I said, that never happens. Like, look at the Ryder Cup a couple of weeks ago. Those guys on the first tee, you see their heart rate on their Whoop data, right? I said, first of all, you've got to understand that never goes away. And if you do get to a point where that's gone away, you're not in an environment where you're doing anything worthwhile. So let's change our perspective and see that anxiety and fear, or whatever you want to call it, is that's an opportunity to showcase all the work you've put in. You were in the spot that all this work we've done, that's why we're here, right? So start seeing that as like energy and excitement, and like, this is the chance for me to find out how good I am. Like, don't be afraid to fail in that moment. Like, give it all you got. We'll reflect after the round and figure out what we need to do to manage that situation better next time, right? But I'm like, if you just avoid that fear, we're never going to find out what you need to do to handle it better. Right. So first things like perspective shift on what is fear, what is pressure, right? And then when it comes to practice, I love to measure things, right? And I don't, it's not necessarily outcomes. Like, you can measure processes, right? Like, I've got this drill of just making 100 3-footers in a row, which you could do, I can do, anyone can do. It's a 3-footer, make it dead straight. You can do it on your carpet at home, whatever. What it is a mental training, right? Because you get to 95, 96, 97, what happens? I start to think, man, if I miss 98 putts, if I miss the 98th putt, I'm going to have to go back and start over, right? And that's, who knows how long, an hour and a half, right? So you've got that pressure that mounts as you get to the completion of the drill. What also happens is I'll find guys, I'll be like, okay, tell me how many times it took you to do it, 4 or 5. I say, well, on what number did you miss the first couple of times? And maybe it's, on the 15th or the 27th putt. And what happens is they start looking ahead, right? So it comes both ways. You get to the end and you start looking back. You start at the beginning and you're looking ahead and you're like, it's the 17th putt. I just kind of do my thing. You lose focus of the present moment. So something like that, where you're compounding shots over time, and something as basic as a 3-footer, the pressure mounts the longer you do it. You start to look back, and if you start to look forward, you're going to fail. And so it's teaching you to be in that present moment, which, when you're facing fear and the possibility of failure, is like, the more present you can be, pay attention to your routine, your presence. It's just one shot, right? Just one shot, just execute that. Don't worry about outcomes. Stuff like that. I like to create an environment as much as possible. That's the best way I found to create pressure in the way we train. And like you said, when it comes to pressure, there's going to be a moment where you're forced to find out how tough you are or how much resiliency you have. And if you wait until that moment, it's probably not going to end very well for you. But if you seek opportunities to put yourself in adverse situations, whether it's golf or life related, just doing hard things, you build that mental resiliency, that mental muscle of, hey, when I'm up against something, I know what I've got because I've put myself in that environment willingly. And that could be as simple as like, I listened to Ryan Holiday tell an example the other day. That could be as simple as like a cold shower in the morning, right? Like I'm standing here under this cold water and I have control over that knob. I'm choosing to deal with some adversity right now and take some cold water. Maybe it's 5 or 10 seconds, but I'm choosing that adversity. So I think shifting pressure is a privilege, that mindset shift, and that's never going to go away, and embrace it. And then seeking adversity and just things we do in everyday life builds that mental muscle of, hey, when I'm back against the wall, I've done this for the fun of it and for the challenge. Sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, I just got so filled up. I mean, what I want to say to people is our mindset is biologically wired to keep us playing small, man. And we got to play big. Play big, play as big as you possibly can. Get on the biggest stage you possibly can. Compete against the best guy on the team when you can. Compete against the guy that you think is the best guy on the other team when you can, because that's where you're going to prove to yourself what you're good at and what you need to do to get better so that you can beat him the next time. And, you know, I started taking cold showers about 6 months ago, and I do it for about 30 seconds. And like this morning was another day where it's like, I'm doing this just because I fucking don't want it. I'm doing this just because I know that when I hit that knob all the way to cold, and I always go as cold as it can get, that I'm going to focus on my breathing, and that it's going to be another day on my habit share of checking off cold shower, and I'll get out of the shower sometimes and forget, and I'll go back in the shower because it's uncomfortable. And it's just a way for me to keep testing myself, and challenging myself to do whatever it is that makes me uncomfortable. And in sales, it could be that next cold call to a client, or a warm call. It could be that next talk you have to give. It could be that next shot you have. But if you practice being uncomfortable, then you find that you embrace it. At least that's how it's been for me.
Yeah, totally. And to be honest, after our call last week, and I see you're on social media, and since I've known you, like, you're a guy that puts in the work, and I'm like, man, we've talked about it. Like, Charlie's doing the work. It motivates me to do the work. I started running after our podcast recording last week or the week before. I hate running. I've hated it my whole life. I ran cross country for 1 year in high school. It was absolutely miserable. You'd never guess looking at me now that I used to run, but I did for a year, and it's something I hate to do. And I said, I'm doing a lot of the right things and trying to create my business and getting reattached to my why. But I'm like, I just found myself getting to that point. I'm trying to create a really comfortable environment for myself. And I've seen what happens when I try to get comfortable. And I start doing hard things.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you, the courage that you have, the vulnerability that you show. I mean, this is what life is all about. This is where the rails of life, get defined. And I just applaud you. I love what you're about. I love the vulnerability that you have, man. I just can't thank you enough for allowing us to be part of your journey, and sharing in such a raw way what it's like to be uncomfortable, man.
Yeah, totally. And, like I said, kudos to you for providing an environment, where people can share their struggles, because it, was ultimately reaching out to other people who I could be vulnerable with that allowed me to say, hey, I need to make changes. Right. And, we talked about it with, guys, look at Tiger Woods, right? There's only so many things that you can handle on your own before they're going to crash and burn. And, if I can share some of my struggles with someone else and keep them from avoiding, that place of rock bottom, like, man, I think we can get there without, it's going to take some pain, right? But not as much as if you try to do it by yourself. And, having people like you to follow that are motivational and inspirational, and keep people like me pushing forward. I really appreciate it. I hope we can get out and play some golf sometime. And I don't know if either one of us will be any good, but we'd have a whole lot of fun doing it. So, yeah, I really appreciate it.
It's going to happen. It won't be because of coincidence. We'll just have to make that happen, man. Trey, can you tell people, and by the way, you'll see today on my Instagram story, Dak Prescott, who wears a little note on his wristband that says, ask for help. His brother took his own life, and Dak's been really out of the front lines of helping people. My sister took her own life 6 years ago. And when we're in those dark places, the idea of asking for help is really hard. The phone's heavy, but if you can do it along the way, when you have those little ruts, then you have a team around you that'll help you get out of the deeper ruts. So thank you for bringing that up. And where can people find you? How do people follow you? We'll tag it in all the show notes, but give us a little bit of a read of where we can find and follow Trake Carpenter.
Yeah, most active just on Instagram and Twitter at Trake Carpenter, just my first name, last name, no fancy website, all that stuff. I'm kind of more of a one-to-one person. Like, I like to talk kids and what do you want, right? Like, where do you want to go to college? Why do you play golf? Like all these things we've talked about, why are you doing what you're doing? And if I can help them get there, I'll try to help. And so I'm just kind of a one-to-one guy. I'm not super flashy. I hate being self-promotional, all that. So, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and you'll get a little peek into me. But, this one-on-one situation is what I really like, and where I grow and connect with people, and how I best coach. So that's the easiest way. If you want to know more about me, is reach out on social media and let's have a conversation.
Man, it's so awesome. Trake, thank you so much for really all the encouragement and support, and for jumping in and being part of my life. It means a lot to me. And thanks for coming on today, dude.
You got to take care, Charlie.
All right, man.